Hello and welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are well. I hope you've had a really great week and a great month. Today's episode is a bit of a different one, but you know what it is because you clicked on it. So it's about how to plan, I could say the perfect business trip. Is there such thing as perfect? I'm not convinced, but how to plan a business trip, how to plan a really successful one. And I'm sharing this because I know a lot of people, are interested in this kind of thing. And I don't know, find it really interesting from a wider, a bigger picture's perspective of how do you put this all in your schedule. So for those of you who don't know, I do quite a bit of business travel, not loads, not compared to some people. I'm not away every week, but I am, every other month. Depends how busy you am. Every other month, every month, depends on the time of the year. At certain points in the year, I purposely don't travel very much, but sometimes it's every month, and sometimes it can be multiple times a month, particularly at the end of the year. So when I started traveling for business, when you start doing it, it's quite exciting and fun, and it doesn't really matter if there's a process, and often you just go with the flow. Because I do it often, I then quickly realised, I need a formula for this, I need an SOP, I need a plan, I need to rinse and repeat, I need something that works and that is reliable. And so over the years, I have now crafted a really good plan of how we plan a business trip. And there's a kind of real process to it, and it's never failed me, wrong, touch wood, bar a couple of things. It always tends to go really well. And yeah, I like traveling. I really enjoy it. I find it really good for me. I find it good for the business. I love getting out and seeing people. I love seeing clients. For those of you who don't know, the business operates pretty much predominantly online, which works really well because I support people around the world. So in a day, I can be speaking to people from 4 or 5 different countries, and it all works. And I don't have to kind of jump on a plane from meeting to meeting. So I can do it all from my home office, which is amazing. And I'm really grateful for that. But sometimes it's really nice to go out and about. Sometimes I've got to travel to an event or, see a client or whatever. So I do like the mixture that brings. And it's very fun. I couldn't do it every week. It would really not work for me in my lifestyle. I can do it once a month as long as everything's kind of in place. And I'm going to explain about that. But yeah, my optimum thing's every kind of 6 weeks, every other month sort of thing. It works really nicely. So when it comes to business planning and business trips and basically traveling for business, there is a lot of planning involved, which I don't think people realize. I don't just get on the train or the plane or wherever I'm going and that be it. There's a lot that gets us there. So sometimes trips are planned quite far in advance. Like, for example, we've got a trip in October where we need to fly somewhere, and it's not all booked in terms of the flights aren't booked and all the things are not in place, but we have a rough idea of what's happening and what we're going to be doing. Some trips like that can be planned in, but most of them aren't. So a lot of the time it can be 2 months before, a month before, even we have had it where it's 2 or 3 weeks before. I tend not to, there doesn't really, we've built a business that means that I don't have to panic get to somewhere. But sometimes we do have it where, I'll randomly be right, we're going here, we're doing this. So it's very interesting. Typically, a lot of my travel is backwards and forwards to London. So I don't travel very far. So I will travel from Durham, where I live, and I will travel down to London. But from odd time to time, there is different places in the UK I travel to meet certain team members or to do certain things. And then obviously if we are going any further afield, so in October, the trip that I just mentioned, that is for a speaking engagement. And so obviously we're flying there, 2 flights, which is always interesting. Hopefully it all works out. But yeah, it just kind of varies. But a lot of the main bulk of my travel is London, and I go to London, and it's easy because it's a base for everyone to meet, and because we have international clients, sometimes if people are flying in, which often does happen, they will fly from their respected areas and they will come and flying into London. It's pretty central and much easier for people to congregate and meet. So that's kind of how it works. Now the planning part is very much now just a SOP. So we have a standard operating procedure that is basically mine and that we then carry out whenever I'm going somewhere, and that incorporates travel, it incorporates, what am I doing, where am I staying, what room do I need, who do I need, what am I eating, and everything gets kind of, well, it gets planned to the nth degree. So yeah, we it'll be like my days are planned to the minute, and that's because I want to, and it works for me. You don't have to do any of what I'm saying. I'm just sharing it with you because I know it's people are nosy and they want to know. But for me, when I'm away, I need to know everything that's going on and what time I need to be where. So everything is kind of minute by minute time blocked and is kind of sorted and is in its place. And so I always know what I'm doing. And then it means I also know when I've got free time, when I've got time to decompress. As you may or may not know, I have a chronic illness. So a lot of this all kind of revolves around my chronic illness. And that has really been massive for me because if I don't, then I can't travel full stop. So there's a huge kind of way up I have to go through of the reason we are so planned and the reason everything is so kind of strategic and in its place is because I've got to be so careful with my health and constantly manage it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we do specifically to help me with that, which does often mean that things cost a lot more money or it takes more time, which inevitably means it costs more money and, my profit margins suffer and stuff like that. But that's just, the cost of me doing business for me. That's just how it is. Like, I can't do anything about my chronic illness. The only thing I can do is try and make it as easy as possible for myself and keep me as well as possible. So it kind of all revolves around that. So when it comes to doing it well and making sure it all goes well, I think it's all about creating systems and processes and like really having a flow to it because that stops potential things coming up. And I mean like making it just like really simple, find something you like and then stick with that. And so even though if I'm traveling somewhere else, in terms of say I'm not traveling to London, I'm traveling somewhere else and I'm going to get on a plane. Oh, by the way, when I travel to London, I go on the train unless I have to fly, which I really hate flying because it's such a nightmare and so inefficient. But I sometimes do fly to London if I have to. But if I've got to fly somewhere further afield, I can take most of the kind of process that we use and apply it to that trip. And then we just have another, like an international travel kind of SOP thing in place so that we know like there's certain things we need to like do that is not going to be applicable that I normally do. So a lot of it comes down to just making sure you're organized and know where everything is. The other thing to think about is budget. So when I travel, I mean, it's not that the budget goes out the window, but it's more so its conveniences first. So every single thing when I travel is just about convenience. How can we make May's life easier, it's nicer, simpler, more convenient, less heavy on my body, less stressful? It's all about stress levels and managing it. And that is ultimately what happens. So there are a lot of decisions made and taken about that based on that. So just for example, like when I'm in London, I get a cab everywhere. I don't really get on the tube. Masses of that is about me walking places because every time I walk somewhere, that takes up a certain amount of energy of my day, which some of you are going to listen to this and think this is the most bizarrest thing. But if I walk a long period of time or go a walk into a tube station, down the stairs, blah, 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 stand up on the tube, that is then a portion of my day that I can't then use my other bit of my brain for. So I have chronic fatigue syndrome I have ME/CFS and the fatigue is like the biggest issue that we have to deal with that we can't really do anything about. And if I push it too much, it gets worse. And so I have to be really careful. So everything revolves around how much energy I have in a bucket of a day and who gets it and at what point and at what, piece of the puzzle. So aside from that, COVID wise, this is also why I get a cab. So I will get a cab or an Uber pretty much everywhere I travel. I sometimes, if I fancy it, will get on the tube once, but I rarely do. I love the tube and I really enjoy it and I would travel, but it's not really an option for me given what I've just explained to you. And then also with COVID and stuff and germs, and because I'm a vulnerable person, so what do you call it? And if I get ill, I get really ill, which is what I've been dealing with for the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, because I did get on the tube and I did go to London and I went on a personal trip and I was going to have an amazing time and I was like, yeah, I'll do all these things. And then I got really ill when I was there and it was awful and I've been ill ever since. It's really hard. It's hard to try and live a normal life and try and do lots of things and then it doesn't really go to plan. So anyway, everything is about ease. So I'll get a cab anywhere. I go to the same hotel. I get on the same train. I will get on the same seat of the train a lot of the time, which to me, you're going to be like, what the hell? But the more I can create a process with it, the easier this all becomes and the better it becomes in terms of efficiency. Because when I think what people don't think about when they think about this, or they're kind of looking at me and my travel, is when I go somewhere, I'm going for business. That is my head, and that's all that's in my head, is who am I going to see? What is it that, whether that's internally as a team member or whether that's externally, it doesn't really matter. To me, I'm viewing it as a client. So I'm like, right, we're going to see this client. And often it can be multiple people, right? So it might be that I'm going for a couple of things. And I'm like, okay, this is the person that needs my attention. This is what we're doing. This is what needs to happen. I am not thinking about anything else. And I shouldn't be, right? People pay, I was going to say they pay a lot of money. You can argue it's a lot of money. You can argue it's not a lot of money for what we do for people, but whatever, right? People pay a certain amount of money and they come and see me. And so for me, in my head, like, I'm exceptional at what I do. But one of the reasons I'm exceptional at what I do is because I'm so focused and I'm so kind of involved and in the depths and in the trenches of people's businesses. And that takes a hell of a lot out of me. That's what people are paying for, right? That's what makes me somewhat different to the other people who do what I do. And so I am not thinking about anything else. And so, for example, like, I'll always travel business class or first class because I get on the train, I can have food, I don't have to think about lunch. It's just like, or breakfast, like whatever is the situation, dinner. I just make everything as easy as possible. So budget-wise, that makes things expensive. But that kind of just is something that I've taken a decision of, and I took a decision years ago, and it just is what it is. Something that might be interesting for people to know. So I pay for most of my travel all of the time, as in the business pays for it. So say someone's coming to do a CEO strategy day, which is an offering I have where I write whole business strategies for people for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, depending on where you're at and what your business goals are. It's an amazing service. It's an incredible service. Now, that's £8,000, and that includes spending the full day with me. You actually spend like so much time because you come the night before and we have a really nice evening and you stay overnight and we pay for all that for you. That's included in the price. And we spend the day together. There's a whole host of things, and I will do an episode explaining that for people because I think it's an offering that people don't realise exists and how amazing and fantastic it is. But in that, we incorporate all of my travel costs into the price of whatever we're charging a client. So they don't have to worry about, paying for, like, we don't charge people travel expenses for me. That just doesn't happen. I include it all in the business. The only thing, for example, for that example of that offering, they just have to get themselves there. So we don't pay the cost of their travel, but we do cover like all their food, all their drink, like their hotel stay. Like, we deal with everything for that for people, which is really cool. So it's like a retreat basically, but it's one-on-one. It's super cool. But then the business then pays for all of my travel. If we are going somewhere on like a speaking engagement, then in my contract, they then pay for a certain level of travel and a certain hotel and whatever else we've got to kind of initiate with people. That then gets kind of hashed out at the point in which we're signing contracts. And then there will be certain, if somebody needs to, like, if I've got to get on a plane or go somewhere for a client who I've worked with for a long time, and this is like an additional piece of work to whatever we're already doing, when I'm quoting it and putting a proposal in, we will just incorporate whatever my expense is. I've chosen to do it that way rather than expenses because I just think it's a pain in the ass for clients. So that is how we do it. It's very easy. It probably sounded a bit complicated there, but it's very simple. Essentially, 95% of the time, nobody has to deal with any of my travel. 5% of the time, if it's like a speaking engagement or something where someone's purposely flying me somewhere or making me travel somewhere, they will sort it. But sometimes we just incorporate into the price anyway, and then that's fine. It just depends on how they want to work and how we want to do. But we do have stipulations in it of like what it has to be because of the things that I mentioned. Anywho, so the budget, I mean, we can spend anything. Sometimes we spend a lot of money. But I think the thing that is really important to note is that everything I do in the business, like if I'm traveling, then that's really draining for me. And so I cannot come back worse off than when I went. Now, I inevitably do some degree because I'm tired. Whenever I go for business, I'm so focused, and often it's it's really something in depth and really like focused piece of work. So I will be tired. But what I mean is like, there's no point in me coming back absolutely exhausted, having had a horrific night's sleep and not rested and not this and not that, because my calendar and my schedule works in a way where I need to be present. And so I haven't got like 2 weeks to recover from it, because this is like something that we fit and build into the schedule as a sustainable practice in the business. And so in order for it to be sustainable, it therefore has to come with X, Y, and Z conditions, which is what I've just mentioned. And that is why, kind of from a financial perspective, we then just incorporate it into our year and into my cash flow and into kind of all of the financial planning of this is what it is. We've touched on the ease of things, but just to kind of reiterate, my approach is, what is easier? What do I want to do? What feels good? And that's kind of what I go with. So I'm not like searching around looking for the cheapest thing, the this thing, the that thing. I'm like, right, convenience. Because for me in my life, that's everything. You know, my whole world essentially is run on that, because that's what I have to do. I can make more money. I can't make more time. And so forever in a day, that is always the justification of whatever goes on. In terms of traveling, the actual travel piece itself, as I've mentioned, you know, I travel in certain ways because it, you know, benefits me and can help me. But I think it's also important to note that like traveling is draining, right? Travel's really, really tiring. Regardless if you don't have a chronic illness, it's tiring. And there's things you can do to make it a lot easier. I have a lot of things where it's just easy if I'm like preparing for it. So, you know, like I have a suitcase that is a business suitcase, which has certain things in, like all of my toiletries are just in there and they're there. And that's just like ready to grab and go. And so I can grab a suitcase. It's got all of my stuff in. I add my suit or whatever I want to wear, add my outfits, put, you know, whatever I need, grab, and then I've got another bag. So I have like a carry-on bag type thing that is like my business work bag, and that is already always full of stuff that I might need. So like stationery, I have certain things I take with me, cables. I have a whole set of cables just for travel, like business travel, basically like an essentials kit of everything I need in a handbag. So if I have to dash, I literally have a suitcase ready to go, and then another bag ready to go, and then I just chuck in whatever else additional things I want. Now that works most of the time for like a normal standard trip, and that's also important, right? Because I'm a busy person, so I don't have like a week beforehand to be packing for this trip, or I don't have, you know, endless time to be looking through, deciding how I'm going to pack. Like it often happens the night before, or it'll happen the day of. There'll be a point in my calendar which is May pack, and it'll have like an hour or 30 minutes or however long I've got to do it. And so this is all about like preparation and making it easy. What else was I going to say? There's another point there. Oh, so wherever I'm going, so let's just say I'm going to get the train, I then will never ever drive to the train station. So I don't drive to the train station. No, I wouldn't drive to the airport. I don't have anything to do with getting me to wherever I've got to get to the next place. So someone else will drive. So either my assistant will take me, or someone else, I'll get a taxi, somebody. I tend to avoid getting a taxi at all costs. So it'll tend to be somebody in the business or like a family member. But yeah, I will get someone to drive me there, because I, again, I'm not thinking about like logistics of getting there. It's like my head is in business mode from the minute I'm like leaving the house to the minute I get back. It's like, right, focus. So someone will get me there, and then I'll obviously get through whatever I'm doing and then travel. While I'm on the train, there's a whole process for that. I know some of you are going to be like, this is so exhausting. But I think this is interesting to share, right? Of like, this is the level of detail that happens. And I'm actually omitting some stuff because I'm like, you really just don't need to hear some of it. But I'm trying to give you the kind of keynotes or cliff notes of what you might want to hear. So I then get on the train, and then there's a whole process on the train. So if I'm getting on, there's kind of like 3 times that I get on the train to London. So it's either, there's a one in the morning I get on, which I'm not going to tell you the exact time. There's a one in the afternoon, and then there's a one in the evening. But I don't really get on. The one on the evening is more so when I'm coming back home. Anyway, depending on which one of those three things, there's then a different process I follow for each. But essentially what happens is I get on and I will eat straight away. And I sit in first class and they will come down and they will ask me what I want to eat. So I will then eat something, and then that means that's done, meal ticked off, or whatever I've had to, whatever we're up to in the day is done. Then I will then start working. And so I like to work on the train. I find it really helpful and useful. And, it's just like I do that and that gets all sorted. And so I then am super productive before I even get to London. And then I get to London and then I get off the train, which the other reason we get in first class is because once we get to King's Cross, it is like right at the exit of King's Cross. So I can get off and out super quick and then load myself into a taxi and then be at the hotel I stay at in about like 10 minutes. I mean, it can take me 10 minutes, it can take me an hour and a half, depending on the horrificness of the traffic or if there's some sort of issue. Well, no, later last year in 2022, it did take an hour and a half, which was painstaking and I should have just walked. But again, I was like, no, I'll just sit here. Had I known it was going to take an hour and a half, I would have walked. But yeah, so I have a whole process and then we get there and then there's a whole process once I'm there, but we don't have to go into every in and out. But essentially what you probably hearing is it's very organized, it's very strategic. When it comes to energy management, we've obviously talked about a lot of the things I do, but also when I'm away, so typically in terms of when I'm away, I like to go away for 2 nights, 3 nights, or 4 nights. After 4 nights, it gets too much. I find 2 or 3 nights is kind of optimum, but sometimes I'll do 4 if we're then going to tag something personal on the end, which I don't often do. But if we're like going somewhere or we're getting on a plane and it's a right trek to get somewhere, then it makes sense, to have some time off. So sometimes I might have a day or 2 days where we will, do something personal. And so I don't mind doing that. But typically 2 or 3 nights tends to be the sweet spot. And that's really nice. And in terms of energy management, basically what we do is I've got to make sure that there's gaps in between whatever I'm doing. We have to make sure that my sleep time is really scheduled well, and essentially I don't do anything in the morning really. So a lot, like my meetings will start at 11, or if we're having a day with someone, it'll start at 11. It's rare that I will kick off at like 9 or 8. I just won't happen at 8. But because I have insomnia and because of all sorts of different reasons, it's essentially better if I've got a big chunk of time in the morning, which means I don't have to get up really early. There's other things like being able to just lie flat. So part of my illness means I've got to be able to lie flat during the day. And so that means I need access to like a bed, and that means I need access to X, Y, and Z thing. And so, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've managed to we're at a point now where I can do a whole day without. So if you're going to be like, what, does she just lie down in the middle of a client day? No, I can do a full client day. But what I mean is that at some point I've got to then lie flat, not necessarily when I'm sleeping. So then that happens at various points during the day. But it's all very strategic, it's all laid out, it's all very good, and it's also very fun. I feel like this doesn't make it sound very fun or enjoyable. It's actually really enjoyable, and I love traveling and going out and about and seeing people and meeting people and squeezing people if they like that and saying like hello and welcome in person, because that's so beautiful and so nice. The other thing to talk about with this is about, do you take someone with you? And often for me, that's yes, in some capacity. So what I mean by that is I travel quite a bit on my own. So if I'm going to London, I'll travel on my own and that's fine. But I often will have some support with me at some point. So either if we're doing a big trip and we're going on a plane and we're doing international or we're going somewhere, then typically I will take someone, mainly for the airport, which some of you are going to think this sounds so ridiculous, but it essentially comes back to the travel thing, right? So when I leave the house, my job is not to get us somewhere. It's not for me to like get, be thinking about X, Y, and Z thing. And so I will bring someone, my PA, with me typically, normally, and we will travel together. And then that's her job. And her job is to organize me. It's her job to make sure everything's sorted. She has all the tickets. She has everything, like everything. She deals with the whole lot. And all I have to do is be there. And I'm focusing on whatever we're going there for, which is so key. Like, I'll share an example with you that's really key. So, for example, in 2021, we did a trip October, November time. And we had to get on 2 planes. And There was delays with the planes. There was a nightmare with it. It was like a real episode. We nearly missed it. They wouldn't let us on the plane. We nearly missed the plane. None of this was our fault. It was just like, it was COVID. It was when, like, when COVID had kind of opened up again and people could move and travel, but then it was still kind of really difficult and you had to wear a mask everywhere. And it was a very bizarre time. So that was like a real issue. And there was a whole catastrophe for like multiple hours as whether we were even going to get there in time. And then to top it all off, they lost our baggage. And the baggage didn't get there. So that was also not good. And that was a real disaster. And that was a definite story time, which some of you will know of that story. Some of you might have been there for that event. That was a speaking engagement, a really great event. And yeah, that was a whole episode. But basically, I had her there, which was great, right? Because she was just dealing with all of that. And I just wasn't. I was like, I know I'm there for a purpose. And so I was quite chilled out and quite just like, okay, whatever. Because that's not my job. That's her job. So yeah, there comes times and benefits when, why you should take someone with you. If I'm going to London, I'll go on my own. And then if I need a team member there, they will come. So sometimes I need like a specific person or someone who's not on the normal team, but is like in my bank of network people who I ask if I need a photographer or I need, someone, a videographer specifically. Then I have people based in different locations that I can call. So if I need someone in London, I have people in London. If I need someone up here, then I would have like contacts here. So that works well. And then in terms of deciding which person I take with me from the team, depends on location-wise where I'm going, who do I need, what's happening, who's makes the most sense in terms of being there. So for example, last November, we did a strategy day in person for a small group of clients, which was really cool and really nice. And there was a whole conversation actually about who was going to go. But then in the end, we decided my head of operations was coming, and she's amazing. And she lives in Kent. And so that commute is doable for her. And so she makes sense to come when I'm in London. And she also made sense in relation to what we were doing, and actually was part of the facilitation process of that event. And so that made total sense. If we're going somewhere, well, basically we essentially work out who wants to travel, who doesn't want to travel, who's open to it, who has the time, who doesn't. There's various factors involved with that. But most of the time, if it's international, it is my PA, because she's coming, a lot of what I do, I can't do on my own. It's just she's coming for me, sort of thing, to help me, to make sure I've got food, make sure like all of the travel's worked out. It's just easy. She can like communicate with whoever needs to be communicated with. But yeah, we do have times where someone else will come. Yeah, it just depends on who the best person is for the specific thing we're going to. And then obviously schedules and things, because all of the team are freelance. So nobody's employed directly to me, which I love, and I think is an amazing model, and I really advocate for it. But that obviously means that it takes some planning in terms of, does anyone want to travel? Who likes it? Who doesn't? Things like that. So the next thing to think about is how to pick which things you go to and which things you don't. So as much as I do travel quite a bit, I actually decline a lot of stuff and don't attend a lot of stuff in person, purely because whatever I do in person is a massive energy thing for me. There's a big difference from me going from my bedroom to my office, which is about 5 steps or 10 steps, to, going out my house and going to X, Y, and Z thing. So I'm really strategic about what I go to and what we travel to. And a lot of that means that it's kind of us organizing it, which is what I like. So for example, I'm happy to see people in person and I really like doing that, but then we organize as a business. So then it's much easier for the client involved and they prefer it, but it's also easier for us because we can control a lot of the variables, which also works. But I do think you've got to be precious with your time. I do see a lot of people, I know a lot of people who do a lot of business travel and it's not really very productive for their business. Ultimately, when I travel, it's for an end point. So it's either someone's paying to see me and wants to see me and we're there for a piece of work, or I'm traveling internally and there's a reason for that. And whenever we do travel, so if I just have a trip just to go and do internal stuff, there's a real clear agenda. It's almost as if we're going for a client. There's no kind of differentiation. It's still as formal. It's still as when I say formal, it doesn't mean that we're like really serious, but I just mean like it's still as kind of strategic and laid out, because time is time, right? And everybody's time's precious. And I'm really respectful of the people's time who, are choosing to, even if it's internal, we're still kind of working as people's time. But I do think you need to be picky, and I do think you need to be really clear with yourself of when are you doing something just because you're like fancying it and it's fun, and when do you actually need to do it and it's benefit the business. Obviously there's times where that can be meshed together and that's like everything and that's fun, and it can be both. But obviously you've got to manage your time very, very well. In terms of technology, I was going to talk about this. So I use and integrate a lot of technology into how we plan business trip and how to get the most out of that. And what I mean by that is really simple, basic things down to like traveling and having everything on phones. So I have 2 phones, and we have 2 phones synced to each other that both talk to each other. So for example, we have all of the travel stuff loaded on both phones, so that if one phone gets lost or stolen, then hopefully, fingers crossed, the other one won't be and it'll be fine. We also have like really simple things, making sure all the calendars link, and my PA has my calendar, and so she can see where I'm going and what I'm doing. We have lots of little tiny things that don't sound like much, but make a huge difference longer term and in the day-to-day to reduce the stress, because everything we're doing when I'm on a business trip is to make it as stress-free and as enjoyable and as easy as possible. And so that means being extremely organized with everything. And so, yeah, we have all the apps and all of the possible things, all of like my laptop, everything charged, everything, that's like a whole thing that goes into making sure that things are going to work. And then also different chargers. So because now technology moves on so fast and we have all these fast chargers and different weird things, a lot of them don't fit into certain like train plugs, and it just gets more complicated every year. And so now I've got like different types of chargers, and fast chargers and not that fast, but traditional ones, and ones that fit in the USBs and ones that don't. And then we have like my earphones, I'll take like AirPods. So we have 2 sets of AirPods and then normal plug-in earphones. I tend to only take 1 set of AirPods, but I will always take the plug-in earphones because that makes sense for various things, which we're not going to go into, but that makes sense. And so there's a lot of things I will do to try and make sure that everything is as smooth as possible. Like my hotel has an app, and so we have the app on my phone, and that already like organizes things when I get, that might be interesting for people. So the hotel I go to knows somewhat who I am. I mean, they don't, they obviously have thousands of guests every month with them, but I stay in a really beautiful, lovely hotel, and they know that when I'm coming, I need water. I need a lot of water. So they will put, a lot of still water in my room, which is really handy. And that means that stops, right? Having that system, the reason I'm talking about this is because that little tiny system that some of you are going to be like, this is absolutely ludicrous, saves me so much time, frustration, annoyance, because if not, every time I go, I'm going to have to ask for it, right? So if we can already put it in a process and put it in a system where they just know that she's coming, she wants this, saves me so much time and energy. And so I get there, I get to the room, and it's all magically there, and it's like, oh, great, fabulous. And so that's all on my phone, and I have someone at the hotel that I can like liaise with and talk to. And so the whole thing just works, right? And I think what I'm trying to say for this episode, if you're still listening, because I know this is long, is like, you create something that works for you. This is not about you copying my thing. Like, you can do whatever you want. I'm not bothered, but I just mean find somewhere you like to stay. Find a travel system that works for you. I have spent a long time. This has come from a long, long time of me trying and error things and moving things and really crafting something, but it saves me so much time and energy, and it makes things really simple now that this is in place. Something that might be interesting for you is the hotel. So depending on what I'm doing will depend on what the room is that I need. And so that's another thing, like booking my travel. It's not as simple as, and some of you it might be, so this will be cool if it is. Like for some of you it might be actually doesn't matter. So you can just book a certain type of room every time. For me, that's not the case. And so I tend to book my own travel, which some people will be like, why on earth are you booking your own travel? Like get someone else to do it, which I could do, but because I've got a really smooth system with the hotel, it's literally takes me a few minutes and it's sorted, because depending on what I'm doing will depend on what I want to, where I need to be, like what room I need. So I will stay in everything. I'm not like I don't want to say snob because I'm not sure I really like that word, but I'm not picky in the sense of, it has to be a certain room. Depending on what I'm doing will dictate that. So I will stay in a really like the most basic room, and then we'll also like hire out the biggest suite they have, which is like the presidential suite, depending on what we're doing. And then they've got like about 10 different room types in between, and I'm pretty sure we've stayed in just about every single one of them at this point, trying to find which works for which thing. So we really utilized that. I also really utilized the hotel. So this took me, I don't know, 9 months of like real decent time. So like I'd say 9 months overall, and it took us like, don't want to say how many hours. I'd say 100 hours of trying to find a venue and a base and somewhere that was going to work for what I needed it for. And I did that in 2020, was it? Or 2021. Either 2020 and 2021 was when were we locked down in 2020? I don't know. But it was a while ago. Feels like a lifetime ago. But it was a long time ago. We like really went through every single luxury hotel in London and pulled them like apart. What was I going to have? Where did I want to be? Like price analysis, loads of things, which was at the time I was like, is this going to be worth me bothering? But it really was, because I made a decision on somewhere, and it just makes life so much easier because I'm not going to different hotels all the time, and I feel really safe, and I have a lot of things that I know where everything is, and it's just easy. From time to time I will stay a night or two at a different hotel because I like to kind of see what's going on, and I like to stay on top of things, and sometimes it's nice for a change. But the majority of the time, pretty much like 90% of the time or 95% of the time, I will stay in the same place, and I utilize the space. So there was a big kind of shortlist and a big set of things that the hotel I chose needed to have for various different reasons and functions and uses. And so when we found that, it was really cool because it meant that I could then start utilizing it in a big way. And that's what we've done. So that's been really cool. What else can I tell you that you might want to know about how to plan a really perfect business trip? I'd also say you need to give yourself lots of time. When you're traveling, everything takes way longer than you think. So don't expect your schedule to run as smooth as if you're at home. If you work from home like me, you can probably have your time block schedule down to the minute and it will work. When you're traveling, when you're meeting people, and when you're out and about, it just doesn't. You're relying on so many other people and external sources that inevitably it's not going to work. So we try really hard to make sure my schedule has got a lot of leeway in it, because stuff happens, things don't work, traffic in London is like the worst. There's just so many potential issues. So I try and give a lot of time and space, and that's really important. Well, we should also now focus on what do you do afterwards, because this is another thing that people don't talk about and don't really discuss. So when you have been on a business trip, it is likely that you're going to have a lot of to-dos and action points and things that you need to deal with following it. So it's either from the work you've done while you're away, or it could be because you haven't been in the office or at home, that therefore means that you've got a load of stuff that you need to deal with. I'm sort of more talking about because you've been, whatever the work you've done while you've gone there, but it could be either. What I think is really important is after each meeting or after each engagement that you're at, that you need to do something from it. You need to write a to-do list or add it to your to-do list of like, this is the things from each thing. Because if you're doing multiple things like I do, it gets really difficult to remember specifics of each thing. Now, that's not me saying I can't remember anything. I just mean I do have short-term memory loss, so it's not the best. But, you've got to try and keep on top of that, because if not, if you're on a 3-day trip, the first day will completely have gone from your mind by the time you get on the plane or the train to come back home. So you've got to be really organized. You've got to have this all kind of nailed down. Sometimes I will have work time layered into my schedule whilst traveling, if it's just for an hour or half an hour, just so I can action a few points if I know that I'll have like some really small but like nitty bitty stuff that I need to get done. And then what you need to do, or what I do, is on the way home, I then categorize it all, put it all into bits and pieces, put it into my to-do, work out with my calendar when I'm going to do it, prioritize it all, kind of finalize, right, okay, well, this needs to happen then, or this needs to happen. If I'm traveling and someone is on like a CEO strategy day, or they've come for a specific reason and they're consultant and they need, part of their service that they've purchased from me is me producing something and then document, e.g. a strategy or a fully written out whatever, then I will often then start working on it on the way home. Because by the time, until I get home, I'm kind of still in work mode a lot of the time. So I will then continue work and get on the train, get on the plane or whatever. The reason I don't like doing plane is because I can't work on a plane. Unless obviously you're doing long haul, then fine. But if you're doing like a couple of hours or an hour, it's just so hard. Like I just can't do it in the sense of deep work. You can obviously do like a bit here and there, but it doesn't really work. That's why I love the train, because it means I can have like hours and hours of focused work time and get through a lot of stuff, which is always good. And then your first work day back in the office. So either that's you're taking a weekend off, or, maybe it's the next day after you return home. I normally then just check in with everything, offload everything, make sure it makes sense, make sure I've not missed anything, and then kind of continue on as normal. And the quicker you can integrate back into normal life, the better. Now, something that's of note here is about how do you integrate back into normal life? Because if you are someone who travels a lot and you have like, I don't know, a family or a partner or whatever, you might relate to this, of that it is really difficult sometimes to integrate back in. Because often you're really highly activated, or you've done something, or you felt really good, or you felt really bad, or you're coming home, and it's like, it's a very different shift, especially if you travel on your own. So like I travel in terms of I stay on my own, like my partner doesn't come with me or whatever. And so it's a lot of kind of masculine energy a lot of the time, or for me it is anyway. Like I will come back and there's a lot of like masculine energy because I've been like running places, or I'm busy, or I'm on edge because I'm on my own. And, as women, we've got to constantly be watching what we're doing and our safety, like, all of the things aside from work that make it quite a masculine experience or stressful experience. That means sometimes when you come home, you've got to do an energy kind of shift. And for me, I do, because I notice it. And before I got this right, and I still don't always get it right, there used to be a bit of friction when I got home. Like nothing major, but there would be a time where it was like, oh yeah, like you can tell you've been away. There was just this like work mode, because when I'm away, I'm just like in work mode. Yeah. So when I'm at home, I do quite well at differentiation at the end of the day of like, right, I'm not in work mode now, finish. When I'm away with work, I'm kind of just away with work the whole time. So it's like, you have to really check in with your energy regulation and your nervous system. And I have to like readjust that. And that can be difficult. I'm not going to lie. I'd argue that's one of the most challenging things I find, because it's like decompressing, but often I'm so buzzed because we've had like an amazing time, and, we've had such a good session, or we've like really done something transformational for someone's business and they've like super happy with it. And remembering to kind of like come back down is it's like a funny thing to do. But often it is made easier by getting home, and it's like, let's do something that's like really normal, and really like the food shop's coming, or this thing's coming, and it kind of already regulates yourself back into it by doing kind of a habit and an activity. But I think that's an important thing to note, because it is challenging, and I think some people really don't know that's what they're struggling with. But if you come home from a business trip and you feel a bit like unaligned, or you're really like impatient, or you're a bit argumentative with your partner, that tends to be what it is. It's this like nervous system regulation piece that you've got to kind of get sorted. And as I say, it is hard. Sometimes I don't always get it right. It depends how long I've been away for. If you go away for a long period of time, by the time you get back, you're normally regulated and you're ready to come back. It's because if I do a shorter trip, which I do at the minute, I've been trying to do kind of like basically like 2 nights, but 3 or 4 days, where I've been like putting a lot in together to get home, and then get home late at night, and then have like the next day at home. Whereas normally, if I'm not really pushed for time, I will like travel back during the day, because it just means that I can like get ready and chill out and relax. So there's lots of different things you can do. I would suggest you trial doing different things and trial what works for you and what you enjoy. But it is hard, and you've got to remember that if you are an introvert like me, I love people, I love being with people, I love seeing people. I do find it draining. And so inevitably when I'm traveling for work, it is draining and I do need to reset and I do need to kind of recuperate a bit. And yeah, that's kind of what gets involved with it. So I hope that's been interesting. There's probably a lot of stuff that I've missed out because it is like a real process. But I'm very much looking forward to the travel we have planned for the business this year. I'm excited for the stuff that isn't planned yet and that I don't know what's around the corner, but I'm sure will pop up because inevitably it does. And that's really exciting. And overall, I love traveling. It's a joy to be able to travel for my job. It's a joy to be paid to go, and see people and to talk to people. And it's, as long as I manage it well, it's real joy. So I really enjoy it. But yeah, I'd love to know how you plan your business trips. Come and have a conversation with me, spark up a conversation and tell me. Maybe you're like, oh my God, you're missing this part and it would completely transform everything. But yeah, I don't know. I hope you've enjoyed this. Some people will have switched off ages ago and thought this is the most boring thing. I think some of you might have found this very interesting and insightful. I would like to know, this is the sort of episode I'd like to listen to. And I like creating content that I am seeking or I'd like to hear because I guess that other people are very inquisitive like me and want to know. Anyway, I will speak to you next week. Take care and yeah, have a good one. Bye.